The largest rocket in the world is ready to blast off into orbit after years of preparation. How big is this rocket? How much does every Starship launch cost? And when will the rocket fly into space? Please make sure to hang on to the end to find out. With the hope of making humanity multiplanetary, Elon Musk's company SpaceX, a short form for space exploration, has created the Starship rocket. This craft has left all past, present, and upcoming competitors in a state of shock. NASA's Saturn V, Blue Origin's New Glenn, and Boeing's Starliner, while being fantastic spacecraft, have got nothing on how amazing the Starship is going to be. So, what makes the Starship so great? Let's find out. The Starship is not only the world's largest spacecraft, but also the world's largest reusable spacecraft. To propel both the Super Heavy rocket and the Starship spacecraft, liquid oxygen and liquid methane are used. This combination is rather unique and is not really used in many rockets. The main features of the Starship are its extremely high payload mass capabilities and low potential operating cost. A tanker version spaceship is being developed to refuel other starships in orbit, extending the 100-ton or 220,000 pounds transport range beyond higher energy orbits and destinations such as the Moon and Mars. The first Starships will be used to launch satellites, with subsequent versions supporting space travelers or being designed for lunar landings. The projected cheap cost of the Starship is critical in allowing SpaceX's Mars goals as well as point-to-point rocket travel on Earth. To ensure that the craft will be able to resist immense pressure, space dust, and other possible accidents, Musk and his team launched 21 Starship prototypes. Furthermore, to keep in mind the high levels of pressure in space, many of these prototypes have undergone pressure tests, where they were exposed to so much pressure that they were made to blast on purpose so that SpaceX could record the pressure every prototype could withstand and how they could increase the specs. Elon Musk, SpaceX's chief engineer, did a presentation about the Starship Super Heavy rocket on February 2022. The recently stacked launch vehicle, which was finished for the first time by the chopstick stacking and grabbing arms, or the Mechazilla, could be seen in the background. The Starship is primarily divided into two sections, the Super Heavy and the actual Starship. First, let us understand the Super Heavy booster. The Super Heavy is a first-stage booster that sits at the bottom of the rocket. The booster stands at 230 feet and houses up to 33 Raptor engines that are sea-level optimized. The engine cluster is much more powerful than the Saturn V. The booster's tanks have a capacity of 3,600 tons of fuel, which is made up of 2,800 tons of liquid oxygen and 800 tons of liquid methane. Super Heavy's dry mass is predicted to be between 350,000 pounds and 440,000 pounds. Each tank weighs almost 180,000 pounds, and there are two of them in total. After that comes the Starship model. The rocket's second stage is the Starship, which is a spacecraft located on top of the booster. The spacecraft stands at 160 feet tall and weighs less than 220,000 pounds. The Starship can take payloads and passengers to higher Earth orbits, the Moon, Mars, and other places in the solar system by refueling with other Starship tanker ships. The spaceship has two main and two header tanks with a combined capacity of 2.6 million pounds. Each of the spacecraft's main and header tanks contain a type of fuel, either liquid oxygen or methane, which is used to flip and land the spacecraft in the header tanks. As we have mentioned, the Starship is going to be used to make humanity multiplanetary. But the main question is, why make humanity multiplanetary? One of SpaceX's main ambitions with Starship is to build a self-sustaining human colony on Mars. Without a doubt, this is something of the far future. However, the work being done now will help to make that goal a reality in the future. Making life multiplanetary is important for the future of life itself, Musk stated in one of his interviews. He believed that humans must discover a way off the planet and go among the stars because Earth's lifespan is limited due to increasing global conditions and challenges. Musk then went on to talk about the government's spending on spaceflight in the United States. Only 0.36% of the US budget was allocated to space in 2020. But this is not to say that 0.36% is insufficient. I believe that more than 99% of our resources should be oriented to solving problems on Earth, Musk says. But maybe even 0.5%? On a larger scale, 0.36% funds the development of robotic missions to Mars and the Space Launch System, which will be launched in the near future. If the US government increased its funding by a few tenths of a percent, government-run space organizations could make more progress. Both Starship and Super Heavy can be reused, according to Musk. Starting with its return to Earth, the booster was said to be capable of returning in 6 minutes, being refueled in 30 minutes, and being ready to launch again roughly an hour after its first launch. Before returning to Earth, the ship must complete at least one orbit, as this would give them a reuse time of 6 to 8 hours. All of this is based on the assumption that no human maintenance is necessary in between trips, allowing the rocket to be launched in a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 3 times per day. Musk also mentioned that by the end of 2022, SpaceX hopes to be producing 1 rocket and 1 ship per month. So, what is the cost of each Starship launch? According to Elon Musk, SpaceX's Starship rocket launches will cost less than $10 million in 2 to 3 years. The fuel itself costs around $900,000 per launch, so it only makes sense that the lowest Musk could possibly go with non-stop launches could be approximately $3 million per launch. As far as the launch is concerned, Musk had laid down a date early 2022 for the rocket to take off. This date was fixed after the launch was postponed for a year, and it seems that it will be delayed once again. The Federal Aviation Administration has once again intervened with certain environmental concerns that they believe the Starship possesses. Temporarily, they have extended their investigation until the end of March, and hopefully, SpaceX will get a clearance on that date and will finally be able to go ahead with their first launch by mid-2022. Bonus points. We will be listing out 2 of the biggest Starship prototype explosions that SpaceX has faced. Starting off with the SN4. SpaceX's Starship SN4 burst in a violent explosion on May 29, 2020, shortly after a rocket engine test. The disastrous failure happened less than a minute after the short test of its Raptor rocket engine, but it's unknown what caused the fire that followed. Musk insisted, as he had done with prior explosions, that the company is learning from each test and going forward. However, Musk did not see the SN4 explosion as a failure. In fact, he thinks that the SN4 is one of their most successful prototypes, as it allowed SpaceX to collect several design ideas. At the time, the Starship SN4 was by far the most tested and longest-lived Starship prototype. The SN4 passed 5 static fire engine tests before exploding.